and 30 more people have requested to join the group since we started. So this is great. We appreciate the popularity of this wonderful idea that Attica had to let us get together weekly and discuss bills that are on the agenda. So please bear with us. There is a 20-second delay, so we're going to be opening it up for Q&A closer to the end of the conversation, but if you have some comments, we're going to be moderating those comments along the way as well. We've got several people in the group with us today. Joni Jenkins, House Representative, is in the room, and as is Tamari with Planned Parenthood, and Stephanie Compton, one of the charter members of our organization that helped us get this off the ground, is also in the room. And who else has joined us in the call? Well, because I have my slideshow up, I can't switch over to my panel just yet, but that's all right. We're going to get going. The first screen is just a kickoff committee thank you screen. Just a quick glance at all the people that have been involved in getting this off the ground. It was Attica's idea, but we kind of took it and ran with it. And Jess Wren helped us create the form where we collected your email addresses at the very beginning so that we didn't lose anyone that expressed an interest. Naomi Penner has been a huge bonus to have in our group. She keeps a bill watch list, and she was able to simply share that with us, and we were able to copy and paste to identify the bills that we want to watch this week. And we're going to be getting back together every Monday at 6 p.m. to talk about bills from her list, and she will be joining us in future editions of this program. But today we were not able to have her with us, but we got her list nonetheless, so we're excited about that. So real quick, just a little bit of housekeeping so that you understand what to expect from these meetings. As I mentioned kind of earlier, we are making this up as we go. We've never done this before. We don't know if everything we're thinking is going to work the way we wanted it to. We even had some last minute technology glitches that we weren't sure if we were going to be able to work through, but it's all coming together. But please realize that we are making this up as we go, and it's going to just get better from here. We're open to your ideas, and suggestions, and more volunteers are always welcome. Tonight's video is going to be shared publicly, so if you do comment, please be aware that your comments may be repeated in the video chat and your name may be used. So if you have anything that you're not wanting shared once we download this video and share it with the rest of the world, just keep that in mind. But this is a more intimate group. It's women only that are actually participating in the conversation because we want to be able to focus on bills that affect women and be able to have women-to-women dialogue, because there are so many males in state legislature making these laws that affect women. We feel like we need a safer space and want to be able to get everybody together for a more intimate conversation here tonight live, but then we want the world to know what we know once we get these things discussed. So we will be sharing it publicly. We have a few different speakers scheduled tonight. It'll vary from week to week depending on the bills that are on the move and what people need to be aware of. So as we identify the speakers, we just want to remind speakers to keep your comments brief so that everybody has time for every category speaker and some Q&A at the end. This will probably last, the presentation itself will probably last about an hour, and then we'll stick around. Joni will stick around. Hopefully she's willing to do that. I didn't verify that ahead of time, but hopefully she will stick around and answer some more questions at the end as well. And we're going to discuss bills that recently have movement or expected to move this week. So we're staying just within this week window, within the last week that just happened, as well as what's ahead. And if something's further down the horizon, then that might be on a future weekly show. So keep coming back each Monday at 6 p.m. And oops, I jumped ahead. Help us find the experts for each program, issue, or bill. Women are preferred. Women guests are preferred, obviously. And just a reminder that this software that we purchased is costing a total of $160 for 3 months. I went ahead and paid for it out of the Save Our Schools Kentucky PayPal account, and we welcome you to make some donations to help us offset those costs. And it looks like I forgot to finish adding the link to where you can go to donate for PayPal. But if you go to our website, there is a donate button on the Save Our Schools KY.org website. Please, $5 or $10. Those of you that are joining us tonight will help us recoup the $160 so that we can continue to promote pro-public education things out of our Save Our Schools account. So I mentioned 1 hour convo plus a Q&A. This is kind of what the agenda is going to look like. We're going to do some intros, which I've pretty much done. And then the 5 key categories is what we're going to try to focus on. Attica and Joni are each going to do a little bit of that. And if Attica doesn't get a chance to join us tonight, then Joni will be covering her bit as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about some education bills. Tamari's going to talk about some reproductive rights bills. And then we'll spend a little bit of time with some bills on the move. And then what you can do about it, resources and action items, jump to Q&A. And then this will be replayed on YouTube and repeating again next week. So like I mentioned, improving as we go. So let's get started. This is just a little page with some resources. I will post this out on the Facebook just so you know there's a bunch of URLs, because throughout the conversation, you'll be saying, where do I go to get that? Where do I go to get that? Well, we've got a bunch of links for you. So just rest assured that that will be made available to you at the end of this event. So the first bills we wanted to showcase were some that Attica herself has sponsored or co-sponsored. And I'm going to turn it over to Joni and let her know that we've got 2 screens of Attica bills. And I think Joni's a co-sponsor on some of them as well. So just be aware that there's this screen and the next screen. So when you have a chance to get through these, Joni, if you just let me know and we'll switch to the next screen so you can keep on moving. And if you could kind of try to get through this in about 10 minutes, that would be ideal.
Oh, it probably won't take me that long.
Okay.
Welcome to everybody, and I'm going to try to fill Attica's big shoes on this. House Bill 180, which is a repeal of the charter legislation that passed last session, is a part of a larger package of bills that the Democrat women of the House are coming together. So you're going to see those kind of dribble out over the next week. This is pretty simple. It says what it does. It repeals what happened last year. We don't think that's going to get a hearing, but we thought it was important for our constituents and citizens of the Commonwealth to know that there are folks that are working hard to save public education. House Bill 20 is a ban the box, which would take where you would have to click if you had a felony conviction on a job application. It's sponsored by Representative George Brown. We've had this several sessions. It does not say you have to hire someone with a felony. It just takes it off that first glance for them. So hopefully we'll give applicants a foot in the door to explain what happened and how far they've come since then, and what so many folks have turned their life around since maybe a youthful bad decision that stays with them forever. House Bill 39, I believe, is new. This is Attica's baby completely. And this takes that box of checking if you've had a felony off a public college or university admission application, which I never knew was on there. So, gosh, lots of kudos out for Attica for knowing this and knowing this was a barrier for folks. House Bill 181 is another one of those women's caucus pieces, and it's pretty much self-explanatory, would repeal the Blue Lives Matter. Many of us voted against that because we thought it weakened our hate crime statutes in Kentucky. Let's see. House Resolution 13. First I'm seeing of this one. I think is a great idea because we know that most people picked up on drug-related charges are probably using and possibly addicts. So getting them into treatment rather than incarceration saves a whole lot of money and saves a whole lot of people's lives down the road. House Bill 179, another one of the Women's Caucus pieces of legislation. This was because of the Supreme Court ruling. This is a piece in our Constitution that is no longer valid, and we feel like it should be taken out of our Constitution, but you have to do that through a process.
Awesome. All right. I'm kind of trying, I thought my picture was going to go away when Joni started talking, so you probably see me moving around in the screen up top quite a bit, and I apologize for that. I'm trying to monitor our comments. I have that on a different computer, as I mentioned, and just to see if there's any clarification or question that people are asking. And feel free to type in your comments and questions about these bills that Joni just mentioned. And if we don't talk about it at the moment that it's timely, we will certainly get to them as we get to the end. So thank you, Joni. I have another slide where I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Where
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you're going to talk to us a little bit about process and that kind of thing. So let me just keep moving on down to the next slide here. I got to dismiss it here.
Also, as we go along, if anybody's got questions as to what HB or House resolution, if they don't understand what that means, we need to start making note of that so we can all learn together. So your users out on Facebook, if they have any questions, so we can start creating a user guide, I guess I could say.
Excellent point. Thank you for that, Stephanie. Like a glossary, I think, is what we talked about. Stephanie has a lot of really great ideas. So as this group continues to grow and progress, watch for some really fun activities associated with it to keep people engaged and paying attention and active on how we're actually going to affect change related to these bills. Another thing you may have noticed is some of the bills have red and some of them have green. It's probably self-explanatory what those color codes mean, but I'll go ahead and point that out to you. Red means we oppose those bills, and green means we support them. So Senate Bill 36 and House Bill 134 are two education bills that are currently on the agenda. We're hearing that Senate Bill 36 probably won't happen because it's an appropriations bill, and anything associated with appropriations has to come out of the House. This is something I just learned last week, so we are all learning these things together. Yeah. But they're sister bills. House Bill 134 has the same language in it, and it would basically give tax credits to people who provide money to organizations that grant scholarships for K through 12 private school tuition. So that's a problem, because what that means is it takes money directly from the general fund in order to pay for these scholarships. So it's a dollar for dollar tax deduction. So you've got somebody making $100,000 a year who can donate $5,000 to a private school. That's $5,000 that he or she does not owe in taxes. So it's a dollar for dollar write-off from your taxable payment, not your income, but the actual payment you pay to the IRS, which sounds really great if you're the individual investor, but what that means is that's $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever that dollar amount is that you donate that didn't go into the general fund. So our general fund pays for schools, roads, and other public services. And so that's money that's not available to pay for what we have coming up in education. Right now, you know what kind of crisis we have in public education. We certainly can't afford to be granting these experimental scholarships, and we've seen what they've done in other communities. So let's learn from the mistakes of other communities and encourage our legislators not to support this bill. House Bill 187 is the Ready to Read Act, and we do support this bill. This bill is a dyslexia bill. It's designed to update the definition of dyslexia and clarify qualified dyslexia screening tools. Would also require the Department of Education provide best practices for identifying dyslexic students, technical assistance, training, and guidance for developing instructional plans for these students. So we support these bills. One thing to keep in mind too is, as you probably know, we have a Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican governor. So one of the ways that you can get a good sense as to whether or not these bills are likely to gain traction, one way, and Joni can probably clarify this better at the end, but if it's sponsored by a Republican, it has a greater chance of getting out of committee and onto the floor. Some of the bills that our Democrats are sponsoring, even though they are great bills, if they don't have a lot of support from the majority, they may never see the light of day. So just be aware, the sponsor is relevant to the likelihood of a bill making it all the way through. So both of these two bills, House Bill 134 and House Bill 187, both have Republicans sponsoring them. So we have to keep an eye on the scholarship tax credit one, because it's likely to come out soon. And it's also very good news that this dyslexia bill probably has a good strong chance of making it through. So SB 55 is another education bill that I would like to bring to your attention, and that is an act relating to school councils. And basically, you're probably familiar with SBDMs, school-based, site-based decision-making councils. This bill would diminish the responsibilities that SBDMs have, decision-making ability. And so it would push a lot of those decisions up to the school board, which means less local control at your school level. And we are opposed to this bill because we are in favor of the wonderful changes that took place with CARA 27 years ago, and we want to continue to see those benefits exist for our site-based decision-making councils. And I think I just moved forward a little bit ahead, but Tamari Weeder is with us, and she's with Planned Parenthood, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of the reproductive rights bills that are on the agenda.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. So I actually want to start off with a bill that started in the Senate Education Committee, Senate Bill 71, which is sponsored by Senator Meredith. This bill doesn't grab people quickly as an onerous piece of legislation. It requires abstinence until marriage be taught as the expected outcome if you are teaching sex education in your schools. This is the only bill that mandates any form of sex education within state standards. So we do know that there are regulations that say you have to teach abstinence already. What is troubling about this isn't the abstinence piece, it's the language of the bill. It shames individuals and families, students, teen parents, if they don't meet these standards. Within the Senate committee last week, the all-white male legislators who voted for this bill couldn't understand what the problem was. They didn't understand that the language, they said, of course, this is an absolute truth that, you know, if you get married, you're not going to get an STD. You're not going to have an unplanned pregnancy. And we know that that's wrong. You can still be a victim of sexual violence, sexual assault, rape. You can still have an unplanned pregnancy and contract an STD when you're married. The legislation is misguided and the wording is wrong. So we are advocating for this bill not to move forward. It already passed out of the Senate. We hope it doesn't receive a hearing in the House. Moving on to some good legislation, House Bill 80 is a comprehensive sex education bill filed by Tom Birch and is sponsored by Kelly Flood as well. It would make that certified teachers have to teach comprehensive sex education in the public schools. One thing that we're asking and that this bill is lacking is LGBTQ topics. It's a great piece of legislation. We're not sure if it's actually going to get a hearing. I know that it's getting a lot of media right now because of Senate Bill 71. So we hope to see that move. House Bill, moving on to some of the more standard Planned Parenthood bills, House Bill 103, the ultrasound bill is back. Last year's bill was ruled unconstitutional in the courts, and so now it's the same piece of legislation that we saw last year, except instead of providers saying what's on the ultrasound to a patient, they write it down and the patient has to take it. So we know that this is already unconstitutional. It's still a First Amendment violation. It is an emergency, so it would be enacted into law immediately. We are anticipating that it will be heard this Thursday in Health and Family Services. One of the co-sponsors is Adia Wuchner, who is the head of Health and Family Services in the House. So we do anticipate seeing this move. There's also House Bill 115, which would require doctors to report statistics to the state about people obtaining medication abortion. This is when they use a pill, not surgical abortion. This is a nonsense regulation, but what's troubling about it is that we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of confusion about how and who are supposed to be reporting information about medication abortion. And specifically, they can't name the patient who sought it out, but they can require all this information about patients who had obtained a medical abortion, which could actually be identifiable depending on the communities they come from. So we actually see this as a bill that may target providers and patients because it will make their identities potentially public. Thank you all.
Hey, do you know what the goal of that last one was? Why do they want those reported?
I think what they are wanting to do is to shame individuals who seek abortions and the providers who are prescribing the medications for medication abortion. One thing that's interesting about Kentucky law is that if you are a full service gynecological facility, you can do medication abortions. You wouldn't be considered an abortion provider. And so I think what they're trying to do with this legislation is out any provider from across the state who is doing medication abortions for their patients, and then shaming any of the individuals who come in to seek them.
Now, is this the same medication like the morning after pill, or this is like true medication that you are truly pregnant weeks later?
So the morning after pill is not a medication abortion. So
Okay.
The morning after pill stops ovulation.
Okay.
What medication abortion is, it can be used up to 10 weeks for when you are pregnant. So you cannot use the morning after pill if you are pregnant. So if you're 10 weeks or under, you do have the opportunity to do a medication abortion, which you have to take the first pill with your provider, and then the 4 tiny pills that you take at home. You would do that after you leave the doctor's office, and then you would expel the pregnancy in hopefully the comforts of your own home.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask questions if that's okay. The ultrasound bill, is that for certain types of abortions that they're seeking, or are they also going to require this vaginal ultrasound to be performed in addition to the pharmacy having to report it? Do you understand? Do you know what the abortion?
Yeah. So
the ultrasound bill.
Yeah. So in the state of Kentucky, if you are going to obtain an abortion, you have to have an ultrasound, and it's good practice to have an ultrasound so that the providers can see gestational age. The problem is the dictates within their bill. It's not medical. They're not using doctors to tell it's not the doctors who are deciding what's best for their patients to hear, or the type of ultrasound that is best for their patients to hear. So in terms of these ultrasound bills, they want to be able to hear the heartbeat, right? And for an early pregnancy, that's only going to be a vaginal ultrasound versus the abdominal. And if your doctor does not think that that is the necessary form to see how far in gestation or where you are in your pregnancy, that is taken away from the provider themselves. But you do have to have an ultrasound 24 hours before an abortion in the state of Kentucky, regardless of whether it's medication abortion or surgical.
But that's recent law, though.
That is recent law. That came out of, I believe it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Okay. It was an additional informed consent.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Cindy is asking, how can this get around HIPAA?
So it can get around HIPAA because it's not actually asking for a patient's for name. They're not going to release the patient's name, but they can ask additional information that may on the surface not seem identifiable. But if you're coming from a rural community and then they start asking you whatever, because it's not detailed, it could identify you. And especially if the provider is in your community as well, and maybe some people knew that you went to that provider, but they didn't know that you could get a medication abortion from them, it could identify you. So the limits of this is what's scary, because there's not any clear definitions of what can be asked for, as long as they're not reporting your name.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. when this bill came out of committee on Tuesday, we were actually there and or sorry, that was Thursday, wasn't it? We were at the Senate Education Committee hearing, and we listened to some really powerful, sorry, I'm talking about Senate Bill 71 now, I'm jumping back up. We listened to some really powerful testimonies from some young ladies and individuals that were testifying to the committee. And it was clear that the sponsor of this bill did not have a thorough understanding of sex ed curriculum that's currently taught in our schools. We really don't have any required sex ed curriculum. Is that correct, Tamari?
That is correct. They have state mandated regulations that do say that. Now, this is tricky because 2 months ago, it had abstinence as the number one bullet point. And abstinence is gone. I don't know why. But it has been there since about 2 months ago. But it was abstinence education must be taught in health curriculum, and that you also needed to discuss HIV prevention and teen pregnancy prevention. The HIV prevention, the teen pregnancy prevention, and STI prevention is now there, but abstinence is gone. It used to be the number one bullet point, so I don't know why. But those are in regulations. It's not in legislation that's been passed.
So by having SB 71, we are in essence only legislating abstinence to be taught. So this HB 80 is a welcome addition if we can open up the conversation and say, if we're going to talk about sex education at all, it needs to be comprehensive, and we need to be teaching not just abstinence, which is what SB 71 only proposes, but the entire gamut, and have it be required. Is that kind of where you see this going, perhaps?
I do, and I do want to be clear that nothing in the bill says that abstinence only be taught, but it does say there's very, I think, shameful wording in the bill. Yes. And the problem is that this can be exploited so that it is only abstinence education that is being taught, especially if that's the only legislation that's written into state law. We see today when you have regulations that allow for comprehensive sex education, should the schools move forward with that, there's still all this fear and apprehension because they don't know what they can and can't do. So I think if they then looked to state standards and saw this abstinence before marriage bill, that's where they would then see their line, that they can only teach abstinence. So I think it's setting schools and principals and teachers up to not be empowered to teach to state regulations.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it would be awesome if they would just combine these two together and make everybody happy, right?
Yeah, I think if they combine the two and they took out some of the shameful language about abstinence, nobody's against abstinence, but we are against some of the language that's in the 71. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it said something about marriage being the accepted standard or something.
Yeah, marriage being the expected standard, and and the way it's written, it could sound that marriage is a protection against STDs, against sexual assault, against unplanned pregnancies, and we know that's not true. And the Senate and the House leadership should really know that's not true.
Yeah, the reason I chose this Martin Luther King quote for this screen is because I really feel like there is, especially when you have males dictating, the only people who voted against this bill in committee were the one female who was present, which was Julie Rocky Adams, and the two African-American males who were present. Senator Neal abstained because he had some concerns about not knowing how this fit into the bigger picture. Like, he had some really good questions about what is the legislation on sex education right now. There isn't really anything that's mandated. So when you introduce a bill that's about abstinence, you really are kind of not building a complete picture. So he abstained from the vote, and Reggie Thomas voted against it. The only pro votes were from the white males on the committee. And really, when it comes to women's issues and women's reproductive health care, it's frightening that the men did not listen to the women on the panel. They didn't respect the other woman on the committee, and they still voted to push this bill through without having all the answers to their questions. And so nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance or conscientious stupidity. Really kind of applies here. And if you go out to Twitter, you can see that several of us have been engaging with the senator who introduced this bill, and he really has no interest in listening to folks that are concerned about this or education. We kind of segued into some education conversations with Senator Meredith as well. And he has no interest in really hearing what the people who are affected by his legislation have to say. And I encourage you to go look at the Twitter exchanges that several of us engaged in.
I second that. And it was really interesting in the committee hearing on SB 71, Senator Meredith said that he supported comprehensive sex education. He said that he supported it. And then when Louisville Sex Education Now tweeted at him, when are we going to see your sex education bill? He blocked them. He has no interest in comprehensive sex education. And you can see this by the countless, I mean, he's had a busy weekend. He hasn't put his phone down. Lots of great snapshots of his comments, you know, when people have engaged him.
Yep. Agreed. All right, I'm gonna move on. And I'm sorry, I kind of tabbed ahead. My technology lags. And so then when I click on something, I can't really tell if it's responding. And then once it finally does, it's 3 slides ahead of me. So next up, we're gonna have Joni join us again and talk a little bit about procedures and talk a little bit about what's going on with the House Speaker. I have a question for Joni about the House Speaker. Some people are saying that until we get a new speaker appointed, that none of the decisions that are made in the House will be valid. So that's one of the things I wanted to ask her about. And then also just let us know a little bit about the other things that she thinks are important procedurally as well. And then I think I'm going to, while she's talking, I'm going to take a look at what kind of questions you guys have and share those back to her as well. So Joni, go for it.
Well, thank you. As probably most of you know, we had quite a battle over the House rules, and every 2 years, every session, we decide on what rules, and that's what procedures that we are going to go by in the House. And there were some good things as opposed to last year. We have gotten the 3-day posting back, and that means that there has to be public acknowledgement for at least 3 days that a bill is going to be heard in committee and therefore voted on the floor of the House. So we should not see bills flying through from committee in the morning to the House floor to the governor's desk all in one day. There is still the ability for the majority of the House to suspend the rules to waive posting, but we're hoping we're not going to see that quite as often as we did last session. So that's a real positive. We, at this point, the speakership is vacant. The Speaker Pro Tem, David Osborne, is the presiding officer. And there are still numerous legal questions about whether or not what we pass in this session could be questioned after its passage, because we do not have a speaker in place. Speaker is noted in our Constitution. The Constitution says we shall have a Speaker of the House and a President of the Senate. So, you know, I think there are probably some greater legal minds that are pondering this. And I would say if we do not fill that position, that it is possible that somebody could file an injunction on any of those laws that we pass. Now, you know, will it hold up in court? We really don't know. We've not seen this happen in any other state, and it certainly hasn't happened here in the state of Kentucky. So that's a big question for many of us. We passed the House rules on the first day, and then we came back and amended them. Within the House rules, there was a odd committee that was created without much detail about members of the House investigating themselves. And many of us spoke out on the floor of the House that most groups cannot effectively police themselves. And this was very duplicative of what the Legislative Research Commission, the Legislative Ethics Commission, what their role in state government is. They are a nonpartisan, independent group that we pay for with tax monies to exist, and we pay for professional investigators and general counsel to look at these issues. I believe there were some people that thought that this is not as transparent, that the Ethics Commission while they're investigating, things are not made public. But when they come back with their findings from the investigation, if there is a clear and convincing or a ponderance of evidence, those do become the hearing there that comes after that is very, very public. So we went back, gosh, I forgot what day now, I think Wednesday, and repealed part of the rules, and that took that special committee out of our rules. All measures that raise revenue or spend money must start in the House. So that's why the budget will always begin in the House. Governor Bevin is going to have his State of the Commonwealth address tomorrow night. And what's kind of interesting about this governor is he is not coming back and doing a budget address. He's doing one address to the House and Senate. So we're curious as to whether or not he will lay out his budget in this address on Tuesday, or if that will come in a different form, merely through a bill. So that's one thing to watch for. Certainly, we expect him to be crowing about the recent decision from the federal Medicaid services. It looks like our waiver will be accepted, which will put in work requirements for folks who are on not only expanded Medicaid, but traditional Medicaid as well. So that's a process to be watching. I fully expect an advocacy group to, once that waiver is pushed forward in Kentucky, I look for an outside advocacy group, whether it's a national or state-based, to file an injunction on that. So that's going to be real interesting watching. And it's also going to be interesting how this is going to be treated in the budget. This plan expects over 50,000 people to, quote, drop off of Medicaid because of non-compliance. So we will be watching Tuesday night carefully to see how he addresses this. He has been saying all weekend that, he's giving people dignity back by making them, work for their health care. And I could go on and on about who is receiving health care, and it really is the most vulnerable of the folks. And 80% of folks here in Kentucky who are on expanded Medicaid are working full or part-time, going to school, or caregivers for children or elder family members. Bills, again, should have 3 days notice. So education in the House is not meeting this week again. So keeping on that Bill Watch or the Legislative Research Commission page can tell you when a bill gets posted. So that's kind of a heads up that it could be heard in committee soon. I don't think that House Bill 103 has been posted yet, but I'll be watching Tuesday. If it's posted Tuesday, it could be heard Thursday. I sit on Health and Welfare, Judiciary, and Economic Development. I'll pause here to see if there are questions.
All right, we do have, Charlotte wants to know the difference between resolutions and bills.
We have simple resolutions that do not carry the force of law. And those are like usually recognizing somebody for a wedding anniversary or something they've done. A concurrent resolution, which has to go past, a simple resolution only has to pass one house. Concurrent resolutions are a little bit more like a bill and have to go through both houses, but they still are usually encouraging the governor or encouraging Congress or encouraging one of the cabinets to do an action. So they don't carry the full force of a law.
Okay. Stephanie would like to know, are there any bills we can support that would bring in revenues, such as expanding gambling? What is the deadline to file bills?
Oh gosh, the deadline to file the bill, you think it's February, you would think that would be right on the edge of my mind, but it's not. Let me look that up while I'm talking. Representative Keene and Representative Rand have filed an expanded gaming bill, with the revenue going toward the pensions. There are some moves for medical marijuana, which some folks think are revenue. Representative Jim Wayne has a tax reform bill that closes some of the loopholes on corporations, and does put in a earned income tax credit. I don't know the number of that. That might be worth a Monday night, just getting Jim to talk about tax reform. And, over the years, we've given people tax incentives for everything under the sun. And I think it's really time to go back and look and see if any of those have done what they were supposed to do. So many were saving jobs or creating jobs. And, we really haven't gone back to see if those things are working. So I'm very much in favor of the ones that aren't working. Let's cut those back and bring more revenue in. And if something is working and they are getting good, well-paying jobs with benefits, I'm all in favor of keeping those because we do need jobs. I'm looking, the deadline, it seems like it's around February 13th, but
That would be a date that nobody else can put in bills after that date.
the last day for bill request are February 16th. The last day to file a bill in the House is February 26th, and February 28th is the last day to file a Senate bill.
Okay. Someone says, Joni says, do you think House Bill 29 will get a hearing? Is that the one that we were talking about? Thanks to Jim Wayne and KFTC for developing a comprehensive tax modernization bill.
We had a hard time getting a hearing on that. That bill's been filed for 20 years or more. And when the Democrats were in charge, we had a hard time getting a hearing on it. I would say unless there's a huge grassroots response and folks are really, really calling their state reps and House majority leadership, no, but we've seen amazing things happen through grassroots involvement. This summer, if you told us we were not going to come into special session sometime in 17, I would have laughed at you. Who would have ever thought that you all in this group and other groups along with you really did push that and kept us out of a special session? And I have to applaud y'all for that, but I hope y'all don't go back to sleep. I hope you all stay woke and keep it up, because legislators have not seen anything like this.
Right.
And if anybody out there is in a district with a person, with a rep that's not being challenged, I'm telling folks, if you're concerned about pensions and public school, it's a $200 insurance policy to run. Yep. Because when legislators they run unopposed, many of them are not looking over their shoulder and they're not as concerned about how they're voting, and they're willing to carry the governor's water or leadership's water. But if those folks have somebody that's filed against them, they're going to be a little more hesitant just to follow anybody down the road. They're going to be asking more questions. And so if any of you listening are in a district where your rep is not doing what you want them to do and is running unopposed, I would encourage you. And I think it's this group that has said that they're looking, if that $200 is a barrier for somebody filing, I know that this group is looking for people to pay that for you. And I'll say right here, I'd be willing to pay somebody's filing fee.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you, Joni. That is something that we're going to be covering when we get closer to the end of this presentation. I've got some links and some additional resources for that. So thank you for that testimony.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Stephanie. You were talking about the House Speaker update and the lawyers that you shall have a House Speaker. So what's the delay? If he's already resigned, why can't y'all just vote one in?
Well, you would think we would. The majority, because they're in a super majority, they are going to decide who their speaker is. I don't think they have 51 votes for anybody right now.
Mhm. So,
And they don't want the minority deciding it.
so is that just what?
They feel that they can go this whole session, from what I've heard, no one has said this directly to me, but from what I've heard, it is the majority party's opinion they can go this entire session without a speaker, with the speaker pro tem filling in.
Mm-mm. No,
Well, that's
because you're exactly right. What's going to happen if a bill does go through and they don't like it, then they're just going to get one of their lawyers to go after it. Is that true?
I would predict that's going to happen. If could be the budget bill, it could be any of these bills that somebody doesn't like what happens and files suit in court. And I have no idea, how the court would decide that. I think the Constitution is pretty clear that you shall have a speaker.
Yeah, that's pretty tight. It's like,
yeah.
Okay. Shell
So
is pretty strong.
yeah.
So, yeah, it just sounds like it's a waste of time and money then. So
Well, I think it's a huge political risk for the majority, and they have taken some really huge political risk in the last session as well as this one. I think it's a huge risk for them to not have an answer to that question and go through an entire session and spend all this time and money to possibly put everything. Even if the courts decide it's going to take a while, what happens to government while we're figuring this out? I think it's completely irresponsible.
yeah, I still don't understand how, even if how can you not come together as a government to choose someone to take this position, whether or not you're all fighting or not? You're denying Kentucky, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it just seems quite petty. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you could see as we go along a minority person, jump up and make a motion. And
Now you're talking about minority. You talking about a Democrat?
I'm talking about a Democrat.
Okay, so when we're talking about majority minority, we're talking about majority being the Republicans because that's who holds the office now, right?
Right.
And the minorities being the Democrat.
Yeah.
But there are kind of two camps of Republicans right now too.
Yeah, we refer to them as Team Hoover and Team Bevan.
Yeah, that's fun. So
and we're trying to figure out who's on what team.
Oh, let's play. I want to play. It can't be that hard to figure out the law.
Well, it moves. It's very fluid right now.
Well, it depends on who's got who on. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's fluid right now.
And we find Team Hoover to be a little more sympathetic to the people and willing to push back on Bevan. And that's kind of what we need. We're not sure if that's who we're going to get for a speaker. In fact, it's probably not likely that we will get that for a speaker.
No, I don't think that's going to happen. But I will say, then Speaker Hoover stood with the governor and rolled out this, and it was only when there was pushback, and you all did such a fantastic job of reaching out and contacting not only leadership but rank and file majority members. And so I'm not so sure I want to give him all that credit. I think the credit belongs to the voters and the citizens who got out of their comfort zone and stood in front of the Capitol in the rain and went to Saturday morning meetings and talked to their state's reps and state senators. That's who I give the credit to.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to look through some of the comments that we're getting. Christina says that Team Hoover is not as insane as Team Bevan. I think we would agree with that.
I think you will see among what we're calling Team Hoover, you'll see the more traditional Republicans, the more moderate Republicans, and among Team Bevan, you are seeing what we would classify as more of the Tea Party Republicans.
Right, and I think a lot of ALEC money is
right.
And if you guys aren't familiar with ALEC and the Koch brothers, that's a separate call altogether. Like that's another hour-long call. But please just Google Koch, K-O-C-H, the Koch brothers, and ALEC, which is American Legislative Exchange Council, and see canned legislation that a lot of our elected officials are being encouraged to file. And we're seeing a lot of that in the education side because we have CARA. We are way ahead of a lot of states when it comes to education reform. And when they bring in this canned ALEC legislation, it really dismantles all the progress that we've made over the past several decades. And we can't afford to be going backwards and making the same mistakes that we've seen made in other states. So be familiar with that, because that is a big driver in a lot of this legislation. And if we are able to say, oh, that's an ALEC bill, then you'll know exactly what we mean by that. So Christina also says she saw there was a term limit bill for senators and representatives. Pros and cons of this bill, and how much of a chance does it have?
That bill's been filed a lot. I think in other states, where I know legislators in other states, it has not worked well. It's made the executive branch stronger, and it has made the lobbyists much stronger. And I feel like here we have term limits. It's voters coming out to vote. People either vote for them or vote against them if they think they've been there long enough. And it just really has created problems. The turnover becomes so severe. And that's one of the things we're seeing in this House, which I guess in a way may be a positive for folks who are advocates of public education. We have a very, very young House. And that majority is a third of them are brand new. And a lot of folks that have made it up to leadership have really not been here all that long either. And they really don't know how to run things. They're having real difficulties just with the procedures and the rules and that sort of thing. So while I think a legislature should be a mix of older seasoned legislators with young new ideas as well, and it's a legislature that should look like Kentucky in terms of racial balance and gender balance. But I really do think sometimes term limits have been a real detriment to other states, and I would hate to see us go down that road.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm going to jump through the rest of these slides, and then we're going to go back to some more questions. Real quick, though, Joni wants to say, a different Joni, says she votes for Joni for speaker. So what do we need to do to nominate you?
Well, I appreciate that. I tell you, I'm learning my role as a minority member, and there are some positives to that. So, I'm much more vocal and much more free about things, but I certainly love that support. Thank you.
All right. Just so we try to stick with our 1 hour main program, just going to go back to some Q&A. Special thanks to Planned Parenthood, Save Our Schools Kentucky, Together We Will, KFTC, ACLU, Indivisible, A Few Good Women KY. I'm going to tell you a little bit about A Few Good Women KY, and that's the group that is kind of a spinoff of Save Our Schools Kentucky, but also, oops, I did it again. It was an idea that came about from a meeting we had with KRTA, the Retired Teachers Association, and Bob Wagner, who is recently deceased. This was kind of his brainchild. So we can really memorialize his vision if we can get behind these education candidates. The way this came about was we said, look at all these bad bills that are coming out and bad decisions. Like the constituents say they want certain things, but then these legislators go behind closed doors and vote in favor of these privatization bills. And they're not what the constituents wanted. They don't ever ask these educators what kind of damage these bills will do. And they think they're doing I think they thought they were doing the right thing when they passed the charter school bill, because they're getting so much of this rhetoric from the Koch agenda and not able to hear the true educators over the noise. So one of the things we realized is we need more educators in legislation, and retired teachers would be great because they're retired and they know education. So we came about with this idea to get more educators, retired teachers in particular, to run for office. And most of them are women. So that's kind of where the nickname came from, A Few Good Women KY. But we basically are searching and spotlighting and showcasing anyone who's education friendly, who understands what's really going on with education.
Vote people either vote for them or vote against them. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. the privatization agenda. So we've already found, David Allen has been leading the charge. You guys probably follow him on some of these groups that we're on. He's been leading the charge in identifying educators and getting them to file. And we're up to 23, and I think we're going to see a few more this week. I already know of 2 more they're planning on filing on Friday. So watch that number, but then also just visit our website, A Few Good Women KY, and look at the other education-friendly legislators that are running for office. This is going to be a tremendous election for getting people who understand education in office. I'm quite certain of it. And then, like Joni was mentioning, the $200 filing fee. We cannot let anyone who voted against public schools run unopposed. Contact us if you're thinking about running, or if you want to know if we've got anyone kind of percolating, because there are still a number of seats that we've identified that we don't even have anyone identified yet. So please keep that in mind. And then Moms Demand Action is another group we hope to have on here as one of our guests in the coming weeks, because there are some bills relating to their concerns. And then, of course, we want to give special thanks to our women in the legislature, Joni here on our call, and Attica for having the idea for this group in the first place. And we will hopefully feature more women from the legislature on our calls going forward. And if you don't see your group on this list, it was not intentional. Like we mentioned, we kind of threw this all together real quick. We had a dream, as Stephanie said on a previous call. We have a dream, and we're going to make this happen. So call me. That's my phone number. That's my cell phone number there. Call us if you want to be involved in future productions of this Women on Watch Kentucky group. And I'm going to move on to the next slide. I have to dismiss this message before it'll go. Call the legislative. Here's some action steps that you can take right now, because the purpose of this call is to not only inform you about the bills that are threatening to the Commonwealth, but also what you can do about it. So number 1, call the legislative message line. There's the number. Email. The links on the Save Our Schools Kentucky website make it easy. You can simply click on a link and it'll pull in all of the House representatives in one email, or I guess all of the Senate representatives, because there are 38 of them. Click in, and one click will get all 38 of them in your to line in your email message box. And then we have the House broken up into 2 groups, A through L and M through Z, I think it is. And then you can also send handwritten notes. When they get a note card from you, or a handwritten letter, or even a computer printed letter that's personalized, they pay attention to that. So sit down and write your representative and your senator a letter. Each one of us has 2 elected officials, one in the House and one in the Senate. They need to hear from you about specific bills that you oppose or favor, as well as your personal reasons why, because a lot of them have a lot on their plates and can't begin to understand the personal level of detail that they need in order to really grasp why these bills could be beneficial or harmful. So tell your personal story and send them a note. Schedule a meeting in Frankfurt. And I saw this question in our questionnaire, in our comments as well. They have senators and representatives who won't return their phone calls. What can they do to get their attention? Schedule a meeting. You're their constituent. Most of them will take your call and take your meeting if they know that you can vote for them. And if you're not sure what to talk about, or you're intimidated by that whole process, schedule the meeting and invite us. Someone from Save Our Schools or from Planned Parenthood or whomever, I'm sure, would love to tag along with your meeting with your legislator. And again, what I have found in these types of conversations is it starts out, you're not sure what you're going to talk about, and then as soon as something comes out of their mouth, you know exactly what you want to talk about, because they clearly don't understand something, and you want to make sure they know what it's like to send your child to a private school or have a reproductive health care concern that they as men can't relate to. So it's actually very easy. These people are very, very nice and very receptive. They're not intimidating, and we encourage you to come to Frankfurt. We're there every day. Save Our Schools has people there every day. Some days more than others. Tuesdays through Fridays are the big days, simply because Monday is a late start. Joni, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they gavel in at 4:00 on Mondays, and they
Right, 4:00 on Mondays.
So Mondays are kind of a waste, and tomorrow is kind of a Monday, so we won't have strong representation there tomorrow. But normally we're there Tuesday through Thursday in full force. We're down in the annex basement, at the bottom of the stairs when you first come through the annex security. come find us. You'll find somebody there with signs and just standing there talking to legislators. Legislators walk through there frequently, going to and from their meetings, on their way back and forth to the Capitol. We're right in front of the tunnel entrance on the way to the Capitol. So they stop. They make eye contact with us. They'll tell us some reason why they're opposed or in favor of a bill, and then you know what their message points are so that you can address that. You can go back and write them a note or schedule that meeting or place that phone call and help them understand how that talking point was misguided or right on if they happen to be one of the ones that gets it. So get to know them, make them know who you are by picking up that phone or coming to their town halls. Another thing you can do is write opinion letters to your local paper. We got to keep the counter message out there. On that slide where I was showing you the education concerns, I forgot to point out one of the photos. In the bottom right hand corner was an opinion piece that was put in several local papers this past weekend about SBDMs and why they are outdated fads, or I think something like that is what he referred to them. And if any of you are at a public school where you have an SBDM and you sit on your SBDM, you know how important they are, and you know how some person that is paid to discredit our SBDMs because he gets money from the ALEC group, from the Koch groups, needs to have a rebuttal. So several people have already started writing their responses to the local papers where his piece appeared. And that's what we really have to do, because there are so many average mom and pops who read his stuff and think, oh, okay, that makes sense, because they don't know. They don't have personal experience with SBDMs or in public schools. And so they read the rhetoric and they're like, okay. And so then they call their legislator because that's what it tells them to do. And we have to come out there with the other side of the story so that when those people are reading the paper, they're like, oh, that also makes sense. Oh, and these people actually have firsthand experience. Maybe we should pay attention and support them. We are the constituents. We are the ones they should be listening to, not these outside business interests. So another thing you can do is join Attica for her legislative updates every Friday at 6 p.m. on Facebook Live. Join us again on Mondays at 6 p.m. The reason we chose Mondays is because we wanted to work with Attica's event on Fridays and kind of bookend the week. We're going to kick off the week on Mondays with this bill watch, and then she's going to end the week on Fridays at 6 p.m. same time with her legislative updates, just to tell you what's happened. So the two events kind of work hand in glove to keep people informed. Follow us and retweet. We have WOW Kentucky, that's Women on Watch Kentucky, on Twitter. And obviously you're in our Facebook group, so you know about that. And then, as we mentioned earlier, run for office. We've got to make sure that we've got more people who understand these issues actually making those decisions and voting on these bills, and also just having your voice heard. That conversation that took place that Tamari and I were talking about earlier in the Education Committee, Senate Education Committee, even though Julie Rocky Adams voted against it, I feel like there was a missed opportunity to explain why she voted against it. We need more women to find that courage to know that there are going to be more than just one or two of us speaking up and against really bad legislation, and our voices need to be heard. It needs to be more than just the vote. It needs to be why we voted against it, and help people in the room and behind those closed doors when decisions are being made, really hear from us, the women, because these laws affect us. So now we're going to switch back to the Q&A. So please continue to post your questions. We've got about 15 minutes left, if that's okay with Joni. Just want to check with you. Okay. So post your questions in the Facebook Live, and we'll do the best we can to get to as many of them as possible. And also let us know what bills did we not cover today that you want to hear about next week. And we will include that in our update next week. And we will reach out, like Joni suggested, get Jim Wayne on here to talk about the bill that we were discussing earlier that he sponsored. We'll see if he can be one of our guests on a future issue. And that is all based on what you tell us. So let us know what you want to hear, and we will continue to make this group what works best for the women on watch. And yes, same place. Amy wants to know, it'll be in the same group. Is Attica's Facebook on Fridays on this side as well. Attica has her own Facebook page. And so you can catch her Facebook update, her legislative update from her Facebook page. Allison spent 9 years on her SBDM. She's seen it all and knows how incredibly important it is to have a voice. When that voice is silenced, there is a problem. Yeah, I'll give you an example too. My son's school lost its SBDM when it went into priority status. And we have had a really hard time getting out of priority status because of that. We don't have any say over our principal. Our superintendent picked the principal. And so she picked someone that was going to be a puppet for what she needed done out of Van Hoos, as opposed to what the students needed in the building and what the teachers needed in the building. So having an SBDM who can pick your principal means you have the ability to pick someone who can be your champion and be responsible and accountable to those people in the building. And that's really important. Whenever we needed to just get a budget, we had to do an open records request. Like it's almost like having a charter school accountability system when you have no SBDM. So we do not want to lose our SBDMs.
So does every county have an SBDM?
Every school has an SBDM unless you've had it taken away from you, or I think our alternative schools maybe don't have SBDMs as well, but every school has its own.
And how would you have gotten it taken away from you?
We went into priority status, and so that was one of the new state regulations about 6 years ago, is if your scores drop to the point where you become a priority school, then they have several different mechanisms where they can try to turn your school around. And some of that involves state intervention. Basically, they come in and they take your site-based decision-making away. They can take your principal away. They can do a complete staff turnover. There's several things in the state law that allows them to come in and try to turn things around for you. And maybe at the time, my son's school didn't have a strong SBDM, and so they saw that as a problem. But the solution isn't taking it away and making you not be able to ever get it back. The solution is to go out and recruit and train strong SBDM members. So they throw the baby out with the bathwater way too frequently, is what I'm discovering. And those are the types of things that we want to identify and have a real serious conversation with senators like Stephen Meredith about let's fix some of these broken laws that tie our district's hands so that they can do better at what they need to do, instead of just continuously coming up with punitive measures based on quote unquote accountability and that type of thing. So
yeah, I'd be interested to see how if there's any differences in those schools between, around the cities versus, in Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky, if there's a trend of any sort with that. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that is something we can look at. Lucy Waterbury is kind of one of our SBDM experts, and I'm sure that we can take that question back to her. Christina Trosper, who is in Senator Schickel's area, she wrote that she was without an SBDM because of priority status, and they just got theirs back. It's so nice to be informed about the decisions now. Trust me, it was awful without one. We had no say. We had an advisory council, but they were named, and it was so strange. Yeah, our principal, see, that's just it. Our principal got to name our advisory council too. They weren't, so she would pick people who didn't show up. Like, it's just frightening to think when you've got people that don't want parental involvement, how much they can get away with. If you've got a good superintendent and a good principal, then it's not as big a concern. But when you've got people that are trying to sweep things under the rug, it can be a huge problem. And that's one of the things we felt. Yep, Stivers District. Sorry, not Schickel, Stivers. Thank you, Christina. So what is the procedure on getting language in a Kentucky revised statute changed, is one of the questions from Brandy.
Well, that would take a bill, just like the bill we discussed earlier to repeal the charter legislation. So any change to the statute has to come from a bill.
Okay. Maria wants to know, what is the latest word on the huge budget cuts that Governor Bevin wants to make?
Well, we'll be watching tomorrow night because we feel fairly certain that he's going to address that.
All right.
We're hearing, last I heard in one of my caucus meetings, and this is, certainly can't take this to the bank, was that they didn't think that there was going to be a cut to seek. Now, how they know that, I don't know.
Okay. Christina says she may have missed it, but what about the bill that allows more relatives of Board of Education members to be hired? I saw this and almost fell off the couch.
Yeah, that was a Brandon Reed's bill. I don't believe it's been posted to education. That's one to watch to make sure it doesn't get posted.
All right. We will keep an eye. Ada would like to know if we can add friends who would appreciate these updates. Absolutely. This group is open for women. So as long as if you're adding female friends, that is completely okay. We are going to be downloading this video and letting the world see it if they want to learn more about the bills that we discussed. But as far as this dialogue that's taking place here, it's limited to this private group. So, or closed group, I guess technically is what we are. So please add other women that are engaged and empowered, and we will welcome them. And Joni says she's very concerned about HJR 12 and 8, the Constitutional Convention, and HB 76, Constitutional Convention for Kentucky.
Yeah, I've been watching those. Chairman Imes, who's chair of elections and constitutional amendments, last year held those and didn't let them go forward. That's something I think to continuously watch to make sure it doesn't get posted and doesn't get called up, because my feeling is that if it would come out committee and there'd be a real possibility that it would be passed on the floor, and that scares me to death.
Absolutely. Tamari, I see your question in our message group. You can ask it here if you want as well. She says, what about gender nonconforming folks? I would guess that if you identify as female, then we welcome you here as well.
I think that's okay.
Yep. Okay.
Now, I'm hoping that as we go forward stuff, we can have some more open groups with more Kentuckians. Whenever we start talking, if we grow, okay. Hopefully we can get some groups that are going to talk about the workers' rights in the state too, and we all need to come together for that. So please don't feel as if you're being excluded at this point. We're just trying to build a base based on common interest right now, right? But if we keep growing, I see many issues we need to talk about.
I think common interests, but also just keeping our voices from being trampled by the people who already have all the power. And, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves in a safe space, so that we can come out strong and try to level that playing field out in the real world. So, I think that was.
And sometimes that's hard for women to even see. I've even had issues with it in the last year because of, some women do get discriminated against, and some of them don't. And it really depends on. So some people understand as to whether or not why we have to have women together to talk about things, and and other people are like, well, what? That's discrimination, But there's a reason.
Right.
I might have lost internet connection during that. Sorry.
That's okay. I think in order to get a real life example of why we need a group like this, just go watch Thursday's Senate Education Committee hearing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Somebody, I scroll, I think it was Beverly, says, and help local candidates. People can run for office all day long, but they need money and boots on the ground. Absolutely. I think that's how we're going to win this war, is with boots on the ground. I don't think you need as much money as you just need to get out and meet the people and share your views with them. So whether it's town halls or, that type of thing. We have, sorry, I'm getting some pop-ups. I thought I had that disabled, but maybe the time has run out. So we have really made a huge difference with our grassroots efforts, and our budgets are small. The groups that we're involved with have, we put on that event the first day of the legislative session in the Rotunda. I think we spent $37 on copies. Like, we have technology, we have social media, we have talent and time. I know a lot of us don't have time, but those of us who do have time, that's how we can make the biggest difference, is to just get out and take action. You know, the grassroots really is what's going to win this war, especially in this 2018 election. And the links, Allison mentioned the Kentucky Ed Policy Org was created by teachers for teachers. There's a link in our comments to that, and it is also on the screen. We will be sharing the links. KFTC has a bill watch. There's another Kentucky.gov bill watch. LRC.gov. Is it LRC.gov, Joni, for the where you actually go to read the bills?
lrc.ky.gov.
Okay, thank you. I left out the KY. So there are people are sharing some links in our comments. And let's see, Kathy says legislators were given information about charter schools from teachers on a day of learning who visited them personally and explained our positions on charter schools. They chose not to listen. I'm not exactly sure what that's about. Oh, my dog is saying hello. Sorry. I would love to know more about what you're thinking there, Kathy. But I can't, we don't have a two-way conversation, so I apologize. I can't go into that a little bit more. My dad was on, Tiffany says, my dad was on an Ohio school board when Kira was passed, and he was in awe of the reform. He told me then that Kentucky was heading in the right direction. Would hate to see that undone with the SBDM bill. So would we. We would hate to see a lot of the things, a lot of the progress that we've made be undone. We would like to see charters repealed altogether. We cannot afford to fund charters like they passed that bill last session, but now they have to fund it. So this is another grassroots push that we can really make sure our legislators hear. So all over the state, that's one of the things you could be calling your legislators about and saying, don't undo all the progress that's been made with Kara. Say no to charters, say no to scholarship tax credits, say no to the SBDM bill. Like all of this will undo the progress that we've made over the last 27 years. And we do not need to go back and become Ohio or Indiana or Detroit or Kansas. Like that's where these other groups that's where we're headed if we follow in their footsteps. And we are a national model for education reform through Kara. Kentucky schools, Christina says Kentucky schools are moving forward and making great strides. It is so much better than it was when I attended and got a pretty good education here in Knox County. We have been on the rise for some time. That's correct, Amy. So the John and Laura Arnold Foundation are also billionaires who have hijacked state worker pensions in Kentucky and have played a role in pension reform. That's correct, Kathy. Kathy is running for, remind me who she's running against, you guys. Kim King. Yes. So we've got a candidate here with us, among us. Anyone else in the group that you see here that's running for office that has announced or is willing to announce? Anyone on this call? Not yet? All right. We're going to keep putting pressure on some folks, and maybe we'll have some more candidates announced soon. The Kentucky Resources Council and Kentucky Conservation Committee both maintain bill watch services and registered lobbyists. I'm just scrolling through. My dog wants to stay woke. Yes, he does, Stephanie. He wants to get in on this conversation, but he is not a girl. So,
are you reading the questions on the Facebook?
Yeah, I'm going through the comments just to see if there's anybody else. Denise Gray, she just chimed in with her own. Yes, Denise is running. Yep. Diane Seaman is running against Osborne. Yay, Diane. And Denise, I forget which, I don't have all these seat numbers memorized yet. So feel free to chime in here and tell us your seat numbers and who you're running against. Crystal Chappell is running for State Senate District 6. Diane will file soon. Eileen Townsend, I'm going to keep putting some pressure on you to run. And Crystal is running for State Senate. Crystal Chappell is running for State Senate District 6. Muhlenberg, Hopkins, Ohio, Butler. Oh yes, Denise Gray is running against Ralph Alvarado.
Yeah.
And Kathy Carter is who's running against Kim King. Stephanie wanted to know. And
Also,
Kathy
it was
is-
announced this weekend that Joe Bowen is not running for Senate again, and that Matt Caslin is going to run for that. So that's an open Senate seat and an open House seat in Owensboro.
excellent. Daryl Owens is also not running again. I think there was, I don't know if they found anybody to run in his spot. Kathy Carter, who is running against Kim King, is also one of our board members at Save Our Schools Kentucky. She's been down in Frankfort almost every day, talking to those legislators. Please let us know if you want to come down. Like I said, my number's on this slide. We will hold your hand. It's not a scary process, but until you're familiar with it and know your way around, I guess it is a little bit easy to get lost in the annex hallway.
I do every day. I do when I go. I'm like, oh, I don't
it's a little when you're down in the basement, it's like which direction? But yeah, we'll come down there and hang out with you and show you around and introduce you to people and point people out. It's almost like the celebrity walk of fame. You know, celebrities are walking by left and right. Hey, look, there's Senator Higdon, and we'll point him out. He'll stop and talk to us. A lot of them, even though they know our positions on some things and they already know that we're opposed, they still stop and listen because that's their job. And other than the encounter we had with Senator Meredith on Twitter, most of them do listen. So, and if they don't, guess what we need to do, right? Vote them out. So we're coming up on 7:30. So it looks like the timing of this trial run, our debut event, worked out really well. Melissa would like to come to Frankfort. Give me a call. I'll post my phone number again if you want to call me, and we'll work out a time. I know I'm going to be there this Thursday. I'm going to be there all day Thursday. Education committee meetings are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The House is still in disarray, so they haven't had their first meeting yet. And tomorrow being like a Monday, their meeting has already been canceled for this week. But Thursday is the Senate Education Committee meeting. We've got appointments starting at 9 a.m. Bam Carney actually came up to me while I was standing in the hall when I was there last week and asked me to schedule a meeting with him. So we have our meeting with Bam on Thursday. And I'm going to be there in the hallway until they gavel in at 2 o'clock. So please come on out and stand with us. We're holding signs that basically say, stand up for public education or stand up for reproductive rights or whatever is your hot button. Please come on out and make sure our legislators hear from us. Planned Parenthood says they're there a lot. Come on down. And Tamari posted her phone number.
Is Joni still on the call?
I'm here.
All right, I have a technical question.
Okay.
Okay, so come November when Kentucky goes to vote, there could be 2 questions on there that we're going to vote on, and one of them they've tried to push through last week or so. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Where they want the
constitutional amendments.
Yeah, that they're adding those 2 constitutional amendments, right?
Well, in even years, we can have up to 4 constitutional amendments on the ballot, 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate. I've never seen 4 that I can recall. And it's been a while, I guess, since we've had a question on the ballot.
Okay, because I was just curious because it seems like we've already had 2 that's going to come on the ballot, but it seems like Allison Grimes is going to try to put the medical marijuana on the ballot too. So I didn't know if it's all going to be pushed out or not because there's too many.
Well, they have to pass the House and the Senate to go on. So two have come out of elections. The one about moving the governor, the state races to the presidential year. And was there another one that came out? There's a bunch of them that are filed.
Okay. But we can have more than 2.
Have 2 from the House, 2 from the Senate.
Which one? Okay.
And Allison's measure, John Sims filed that in the House, I believe.
So that would be considered one from the House. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just read earlier that you could only have 2 a year or 2 at elections, so I didn't know if they already had their 2. I might be getting confused with
Nothing's passed. A few things have passed committee, but nothing. We've passed nothing on the floor of the House yet. Now, the Senate passed a constitutional amendment on Marcy's Law. They passed that out Thursday, I believe.
Okay. And my last question is, I don't know if the bill came up here tonight, but it is of concern, is the protester bill.
Yeah, that's Wesley Morgan's
Is
House
that-
Bill 36. No, wait a minute, House Bill 53. He's got several problematic bills.
What are their chances?
You know, he's an interesting guy. He's taken a real hard line against Team Hoover, so I'm not sure he's going to see any bills being considered. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Well, whatever. If they want to be up there fighting, that's good for some of those bills because, they're just not, they're, okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
I know.
I agree. Maria wants to know, Maria asked a really good question and probably a good note to end on. She wanted to know, do we have any Republicans fighting against the education cuts? Yes, we do. Several Republicans in the House and Senate, not several, but a handful, I should say, voted against the charter school bill last year. And we have recognized them and are continuing to recognize them for their political courage and thank them. And we expect them to continue to vote against these harmful bills again this year. And what we're finding is even those who voted for the charter school bill are recognizing the mistake that they made, and we're starting to see more Republicans come forward and admit that they want to support public education. And there's a new group forming called Republicans for Public Education. And so look for them on Facebook and Twitter. It is led by a Republican teacher in JCPS, who is also a member of our group, but it also has Jill York and CB Embry, some members from our legislative assembly who are willing to be charter members of the group to really get it kicked off and basically send the message that if you're pro-public education, then you're part of this group. And therefore, if you voted for charters, then you basically are voting against public education, and you are either with us or you're against us. And we're kind of drawing that line in the sand and asking Republicans to pick. You can't have it both ways. And so that's looking like it's going to be a very popular group for Republicans to get on board with, because there are a lot of them who support public education.
I'm also hearing that a lot of legislators are getting support emails about the tax credit bill. So we need to ramp up our side to communicate that that's a bad movement.
Absolutely. So look for the tools on the websites. SaveOurSchoolsKY.org is a great place to get some of those tools to fight the scholarship tax credit bill. And also look at our partners that we mentioned in this presentation, and let us know. Send us some messages on Facebook or reply to the email. If you got my email inviting you to this meeting, then you have my Gmail address as well. Let us know what you want to see, what bills you want to see, what guests you would like to see, and how you would like to see this improve as we go forward. We've got someone asked if we could start at 7 instead of 6 because this is the dinner hour. We chose 6 o'clock, as I mentioned earlier, just because it bookends nicely with Attica's legislative update on Fridays. But if we get enough requests to push it back an hour, we can certainly look at doing that. So just keep giving us your feedback. We really appreciate everybody for joining in. And we look forward to seeing you in Frankfurt and then again next Monday for our next live event. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.